serious, what's your best story about listening to a gut feeling? Story 1. Really didn't feel like going out for a drink after work with friends, but something told me to go. Met my husband that night in the bar. We've been married 24 years. Story 2. I was friends with this girl in high school and we helped each other out with our depression. Well, one day she just seemed off and distant and I tried really hard to get through to her. All day was like that, then we went home and my texts weren't being answered. I got this really bad feeling and called my dad and told him I thought she was going to kill herself. He works with her dad and he told him. Dad races home and finds her mid-suicide attempt. She had never attempted before and never told anyone she had felt suicidal. I just couldn't shake the feeling. I'm glad I stuck with it. Edit. Thanks to everyone replying and to the person who gave me the Reddit gold. I honestly didn't think anyone was going to read my comment. I just posted a memory about someone who has been on my mind a lot this week. Watch for the warning signs, guys, and listen to your gut. It could mean life or death. All of you are precious and mean the world to someone, so please take care of yourselves. Also, I will respond to your comments when I can, I promise. Story 3. I woke up one morning with a deep sense of be very careful today. Around mid-afternoon, I was stopped at a red light, one where you had zero sight of the direction left of the intersection. The light turned green. I felt the be very careful gloom again. I started to pull into the intersection very slowly, looking carefully in the direction I couldn't see from. It was now a good 5 seconds after the light changed. Horn behind me was blowing. When ZOOMMM, a semi came flying past the nose of my truck. How it didn't hit me I have no idea. Had to have missed me by literally a hair. After that, I didn't feel that gloom the rest of the day-night. Story 4. This just happened today. Context. I live in a corrupt third world country and police here are more of extorters than protectors. I was supposed to head somewhere today, and as I was taking my wallet I thought, maybe this is too much to have on me, so I left most of the cash home. Cut to a few hours later. I'm walking along a suspiciously barren path, between two sort of police stations, listening to music through my earphones. Some guy then taps me on my shoulder and points to a gate where a policeman with an AK is motioning for me to come over. I didn't hesitate because I thought it would be an issue about me taking pictures as I had my phone out. I head over, quite calm. What's your name? My suicide account. Alright, get in there, he says while pointing to a shed that's beside the gate. He tells me to sit down when we get in. Do you know it's illegal to have earphones on around these areas? WTF. JPEG. At this point I totally know how this will go. Since it's not my first time being apprehended, they basically start talking about how they'll put you in a cell and you'll have to wait till the weekday to get your case heard. Anyways, of course he asks for money. I tell him I don't have much. He tells me to chuck my wallet and show him. I do and he takes most of what I have, so yay, I got less extorted out of me than I would have if I didn't listen to my gut. Edit. First of all, it's really that so many people have related to this. It's a sad situation when the people who are delegated the responsibility of protecting the common citizen from harm are one of the main cause of said harm. However, it's also important to note that us as citizens have a responsibility to not give in to give said bribes just to get out of trouble. I'm guilty of it. I'd rather pay that 5 bribe than the 50 fine through the proper channels, and that's my own fault for enabling them. I'm trusting that next time will be better. Second, congratulations Uamontes09, you just won yourself free citizenship to my country. Please remember to leave all backtalk and sense of calm when spotting a police uniform. It's Kenya. Story 5. Long story short, Dad nearly kidnapped by fake customs officers when he was a young adult. My dad went to Madrid to stay with a friend. There was sudden change and they couldn't pick him up from the train station. He had to sleep rough in the station. After being mistaken for a prostitute twice, 2 customs officers showed up and started showing my dad their badges and telling him to go with them. Already unsure because they weren't in uniform, my dad followed them anyway. They were putting his stuff in the back of an unmarked car and beckoning him to get in, all the time reassuring him and showing their badges. When he saw a police officer walking down the side of the road, feeling that something was really wrong, he went up to the police officer and asked him to help get his stuff out of the car. The police officer went over to the 2 men, got the stuff out the car and talked to them and got them to show him their papers. Turns out they were fakes and the officer took Dad back to the police station after arresting the 2 men and allowed him to stay the night there. Dad got back with his friend and we all lived happily ever after. Story 6. In high school around everybody's birthday, all their friends would go all out, bringing balloons, brownies, gifts, you name it. It was just a fun tradition the whole school partook in to help with stress and whatnot. Fast forward to my birthday and as per usual I was given balloons, cake, funny letters for my good friends. All of a sudden I felt like someone was watching me and I turn around to see a girl in our class staring at me. I walk over and just start a conversation with her, asking her when her own birthday was, and made a mental note. I had such a string gut feeling that I needed to do something for her on her birthday, even though this was our first time talking. I knew this girl was very shy, a little strange, and had recently been given a lot of for coming out to a few people at our school, so I figure her birthday might not be as recognized or participated in as maybe mine was. Fast forward to her own birthday, and I brought her the biggest balloon I could find and some baked goods. As classes went on, I soon realized that was the only thing anyone got her that day. I caught her in the parking lot to say happy birthday one last time before heading to practice, and she seemed happy and normal. Fast forward to about 4 months later I got chatting to her again. She pulled me aside and told me that for the last year or so she had been planning to kill herself on her birthday. I was in shock. She told me that the balloon and goodies showed her enough of a brighter side to life to hold off and rethink things. since a stranger seemed to care enough about a special day for her. I still can't believe it. TLDR, a balloon saved a girl's life. Story 7. I was driving home late on night and just minding my own business, hanging out in the center of 3 lanes on the highway doing maybe a few mph over the speed limit. Suddenly I just felt, almost heard, the strongest gut feeling I'd ever had that I needed to swerve over now. So I did, and not a second later did a huge black truck come absolutely flying through all 3 lanes, just missing me by feet. Would have nailed me if I'd have stayed where I was. Didn't have his lights on, so I had no idea he was there. Strange addition to the story. I don't believe in God or prayer or anything like that at all. My mother, though, called me almost immediately after this happened. She said she woke up with an urgent feeling to pray for me right then. She asked if anything had happened. I told her about what had happened and she started crying. Absolutely nuts. I'm a recovered drug addict and party girl. For 2 years of my life, almost every day was focused on going to parties and getting drunk and high. I would go to random parties and take random drugs just to achieve this. One Saturday, a good friend calls to invite me to a party at his brand new house. It was going to be a good party with a bunch of my friends, and lots of substances to partake in. For some reason though, my brain told me to sit this party out. It was probably the first Saturday in over a year that I had chosen to stay in. Woke up the next morning and found out that some of my friends, including the one who had invited me, had gotten into a huge fight. One of the guys pulled a gun out, chased the others through the house, and shot 2 guys, one in the stomach and one in the face. Literally dodged a bullet there. Story 8. When I was about 9 to 10 years old, I used to water my neighbor's plants for her when she was on vacation. Normally my older brother and I went together, but the previous day we got into a giant argument turned into water fight while doing the task, so my mom decided we would go alone on alternate days for the rest of her trip. Now my neighbor had a lot of flowers both in front of and in back of her house, and tiny 10-year-old me had to drag a hose between the two. It wasn't an easy task. I started by dragging the hose from the side yard to the front. I noticed the back sliding screen door was in the center, where I thought it was usually to the side. I shrugged it off and got the hose to the front door. Then, all of a sudden had a gut feeling something was off and I needed to get out of there. I dropped the hose and went back to my house next door, separated by about an acre of heavily wooded area. I told my mom something was off and I was too scared to finish watering. She brushed me off and we went about our day, telling me we could finish the task together later. She thought I was just too tired or lazy to do it all on my own. I told her that it wasn't true and I got a weird feeling over there, but anyways we decided we would return that evening when it cooled off. When we returned that evening, the back window was broken and my neighbor's house had been robbed. One of the large flower pots was now knocked over, where it hadn't been that morning. The screen door was now off to the side again. That means the burglars were probably inside while I was outside watering the plants. We were both terrified and called the police, of course. My mom now believes my gut feelings. Story 9. I told this story in the last gut feeling thread, but it's worth reposting. I was a birthday party princess in college. Dress up as a Disney character, sing some songs, help with cake, paint faces, typical party stuff. I get called to a party that began at 8 p.m. Unusual but not unheard of in our industry. A lot of Spanish-speaking families party well into the night. But I pull up down the street, princesses don't drive, and begin walking to the house, dressed as Sleeping Beauty, my party box of supplies in hand. But when I saw the house I knew immediately something was wrong. There were no lights on, no cars, no balloons. But against my better judgment I knocked on the door. This super creepy looking guy in his mid-50s answers, in a dirty t-shirt and jeans. And the first thing he says is the party's around back. I took one look at this guy and booked it as fast as I could while holding a box, wearing a ball gown and being mildly crippled to begin with. I got into my car, locked the doors, floored it to a 7 to 11 and called my boss. The party never called demanding to know where their princess was. No one asked for their deposit back. My boss called police non-emergency, but I don't know if anything was ever done. I'm 100% sure there was no party in that house. Story 10. So my friend and I were walking around at like 200 in the morning playing Pokemon Go when it had first came out. It was very quiet and we were just talking to each other when all of a sudden a very loud truck came down the road and drove past us. Then all of a sudden I just got this feeling in my gut that told me to run. I told my friend what I was feeling, and he immediately told me to run. So we ran behind a gas station parking lot and hid behind a dumpster for a second. And sure enough, that same truck had turned around at the light and came back to the parking lot and even went behind the store in their truck looking for us. They were in and out, but it was still one of the most chilling feelings I've had before. Story 11. I've told this story before, but it was when my gut told me to not stop and help a woman in distress, and to keep driving. She turned out to be a ploy for a group of people who attack people and steal cars from those who pull over to help. It's a creepy feeling. Story 12. I was joy riding around with 2 friends in the Shenandoah National Forest. We saw that one road was open which had always been gated, so we decided to go down it to explore. We drove probably 10 miles down this road, which seemed to be surprisingly well traveled considering its gate is locked 99% of the time. The road dead-ended and we got out to look around. It was obvious someone had been there with fresh tire tracks around. The ground was pretty disturbed as well. The 3 of us split up to look around more. I came across a fire pit with a few makeshift benches. It was obvious the fire had just been quickly snuffed out. I started to get that gut feeling. Then I noticed next to the fire pit a stick drove into the ground. On top of the stick rested a lit cigarette. At this point my stomach had pretty much dropped out of my. I even drew my pistol and started to quickly but not in a panicked way make my way back to the truck. It seemed to me that someone was hiding from us. I get back to the vehicle and my two friends had also drawn their pistols and we didn't even need to say anything to each other. We all felt the same thing, which was a need to GTFO of that hollow as fast as possible. We haven't been back since. Turns out a short time later a man went missing in that same general area. To this day he has never been found despite many search attempts. Name is Robert Fitzgerald. I think some people were hiding out there, maybe making meth, maybe running from the law. I've also heard a very similar story from another Redditor who confirmed it happened in the same area and same time frame. Story May 13th. I do a not listening to my gut feeling. 2 months before my marriage I had the most gut-wrenching feeling that I should not marry the woman I was about to. 8 months later we divorced. I was so stupid. Story 14. My girlfriend, now wife, called me the night before 911 telling me she had the strangest feeling that something terrible was about to happen. She had never said anything like previously, nor since. The odd thing was that when she called at that moment, I was holding the engagement ring I had purchased for her earlier that day. So you can imagine what was going through my head as she told me about her gut feeling. Story 15. Was taking my dog to the park and was stuck at a light. I live in a busy city and people drive like, the light turned green and people began walking across the crosswalk. As I pulled out to take my turn, I felt like I needed to brake and just went with it. Right as I do that, a white SUV flies through their red light. They almost hit the people walking across and come within inches of my car. I laid on my horn and all I could see was this middle-aged woman looking up from her phone. This all happened within about a second, but I still hate that woman and her face is burned into my brain. She could have killed the people walking or hit my car and tossed my dog. Don't strap her in because it is literally a 1-minute drive. Story 16. In high school, my GF had me come to her youth group and her youth pastor, who was also a music teacher at our HS who was adored by the community, really didn't sit well with me. I saw him go from 100 praise singing to turning around to his wife and muttering something awful to her with the worst glare I'd ever seen. Only she and I were in his line of sight, then go right back to fake smile singing. I told her he seemed really fake and there was a dark side to him. Turns out he was really into Kitty PR0N, and even started buying alcohol for his pupils and inviting them to his house. The church knew, covered it up, and he eventually got arrested for misconduct with a minor, did a quick jail stint and moved out of state. Story 17. I couldn't sleep so I was driving around in the middle of the night, listening to music and enjoying the empty roads. Finally I started heading for home and joined up with my usual route, getting to a point where I can turn right to head home, and left goes up towards the next big town. I'd been driving for a while but as I reached this turn I had the overwhelming urge to turn left. Every time I thought about turning right, I felt this sense of dread and discomfort. I couldn't even bring myself to start to signal for that direction. I turned left instead and drove to the next town, turned around there, and came back, adding about 40 extra minutes to my journey. When I approached that road again, I felt fine and continued home. I arrive home and literally as I'm turning into my drive, my tire blows out, no warning, just bam. Luckily I'm only going about 5 miles per hour as I turn into my drive, but it was still an effort to control the car. It was almost impossible to park. At the steering wheel was hard to turn, and the passenger side of the car felt heavy and difficult to maneuver. I was pissed but thankful it had happened when I was in my drive, and not stranded out in the country at 3 a.m. It hit me as I was organizing someone to come out and fix it the next day. Usually at that time of the morning I would be heading into town. If the tire was going to blow, it would have done so 20 minutes into the journey. When I was on a busy road doing 60 miles per hour with oncoming traffic only feet away, the extra time added to the journey the night before had instead caused it to blow harmlessly in my drive. I have no way to prove that it would have blown in a more dangerous place, but considering my gut instinct, I do think the detour probably saved my. Story 18. It was like someone was telling me to stand in my kitchen. I had everything I needed to leave for work, but this feeling of forgetting something was so strong I just stood there. After I checked for everything again, I took a step towards the door and it was like someone was yelling at me to stop, so I stood for 10 more seconds. And then the feeling went away, like a gate was lifted and I could pass. Got in my car and did my normal drive, hit some heavier than normal traffic before coming across a 5-car pileup. One car was turned 180, others were smashed and everyone was standing around on their phones. Had I left like I wanted to, I would have been it. I knew it too and just said out loud, thank you. Story 19. It happened in the worst way. I was working with a patient whose cancer was in full remission. She looked amazing and was telling me about the trips she and her husband was planning, Paris, Africa, etc. All the places she couldn't go to because of kids, military, and now cancer. But now with nothing holding her back she was going to take the world by storm. It hit me, and it hit me hard. As we were setting up her follow-up appointment she asked me if I was okay. I said gas and she laughed me off. 1 week later she died in the hospital. Her cancer returned and in record time destroyed her to the point that she was bleeding out internally. They were going those so many bags of blood that the commander of the hospital told them to stop. I will never forget the look on her face as she dreamt of the future that I knew would never happen and the feeling it gave me. Story 20. Allergy shots. I was 12 when I started allergy shots. And it's a 5-year program to try to make yourself immune from allergies. There is a standard of 15 minutes you have to wait after getting the shots to make sure there's no reaction. You also have to understand the way they do allergy shots. They start with a really small dose, and gradually build up the dosage, stay at the peak level, and then start over with a small dosage. They repeat this over and over until the treatment is done. Anyway, I had been getting them for 4 years now, 1 more year left. I was at the peak dosage level for a month or so and everything seemed normal. I got my shots, waited the 15 minutes, and my dad who drove me there said the time was up and we could go. I felt fine, but I just felt like I needed to wait a little longer, and I told him let's just wait 5 more minutes. Within the next couple of minutes, I was having trouble breathing. We got the doctor and he had me do the breath strength test where you blow into a tube to check your lung strength or something, and this was visually represented as the 3 little pigs, and I am trying to blow the doors down. I normally get them all down without a problem. This time, I couldn't even get the first door down. They rushed me to an exam room and laid me down, got me some oxygen, and were checking my blood pressure levels. My BP was dropping, and they told my dad to call my mom because I might not make it. They had to give me 2 shots of what I was told adrenaline or something, but I'm assuming it was actually epinephrine, I don't know for sure, but they said to keep my heart pumping and to stop the blood pressure from going down. Anyway, I came out of it and they informed me I'm no longer allowed to get allergy shots ever again. Which sucks because I didn't finish the series and my allergies are back as if I've never spent years getting allergy shots every week, but at least I'm alive, glad I trusted my feelings. Story 21. This will probably get buried, but it's cool. My mom was actively dying in hospice and my sister, brother-in-law, and I were in the room with her, basically just waiting for her to take her last breaths. It took her about 24 hours to go from actively dying to passed away. Anyway, we were all taking turns taking naps so one of us would be awake in case the moment came. My sister stepped out of the room to take a phone call and my BL was already asleep. I closed my eyes for a few seconds it felt like, but I must have fallen asleep because I remember being jolted awake by this feeling of urgency. I sat up and the nurse looked at me with that look on her face like, oh, it's gonna happen, so we yelled for my sister, woke my BL up, and within about 2 minutes, my mom passed peacefully with all of us awake and surrounding her with love. I've just never had that feeling of urgency so hard in my life. Story 22. In my teens, I used to help the elderly lady across the street with yard work, painting, and odd jobs to help maintain her home. She lived alone and couldn't manage it by herself. As I've shared here some time ago, I noticed that things had changed across the street. Her lights weren't coming on at night per usual, and I didn't see her outside for several days, so my instincts told me to go over and check. I found her lying on the kitchen floor, dead, with her beloved cat Tompkins crying for food and looking upset. If I hadn't followed my gut feelings and looked in, the situation might have gone on for a long time as no one else visited her or checked in on a regular basis. Story 23. I've told this multiple times at this point, but my mom and dad went to visit some friends in Thunder Bay, Ontario. The friends introduced my parents to their daughter and her boyfriend. Well, the entire time my parents were visiting, my mom kept getting this really bad feeling about the boyfriend. He made her so uncomfortable for some reason that my parents actually ended up leaving early because my mom kept getting such a weird vibe from the guy. Well, a few weeks after their visit, the boyfriend killed my parents' friends, their daughter and other kid, and then himself, so my mom was definitely right. Story 24. Driving my teenage nephew to a job interview. In the car was also his grandmother and younger brother. Suddenly and totally unexpectedly, I felt as if I was compelled to speak. I had an intense feeling that he shouldn't take the job. I warned him that I felt a terrible dread and felt that awful suffering and death was associated with the place. It also felt as if these weren't my words and I was just transmitting a message, passing on an ethical warning. He got the job. It was in a restaurant, having ignored my warning. Turns out the place was a hotbed of junkies who soon got him hooked too. Death, despair and madness followed. His friends died, one by one of overdoses. His GF2, he became a hollow-eyed scarecrow and opportunistic sneak thief. He broke in and stole his grandmother's engagement ring while she was at her husband's funeral. He went to prison. He was raped there. He eventually lost his mind. Strange to report, he's still alive when so many others along the way died. He's about 40 now and living on a pension and doing okay, but the damage to his brain is permanent. You can call my message a gut feeling if you want, but as I related earlier, it felt more like I was acting as a transmitter. Story 25. During a family vacation in Yellowstone, my parents sent me and my siblings out of our rented cabin so they could be alone in hindsight to do things I'd rather not think about. There was a small gas station type of store by the main lodge, so they handed me some cash and told us to go out and get ice cream. Some relevant information: there were 2 ways to the main lodge from our cabin, a scenic lakeside walk, or a roadside trek. As the eldest sibling, I was in charge of the younger 2 and the ice cream mission, normally, in the kind of person who picks the scenic route, but something that day told me to walk the not as pretty road. My siblings were disappointed, but I pulled rank and we walked the road to the store. On our way back from getting ice cream, we passed by a cabin next to ours along the road, where the current renter was sitting on the porch. He yelled over at us to be careful and get inside. Not 15 minutes earlier, when we would have been walking to get ice cream, he had seen a decent-sized grizzly bear walking on the lake right where we would have walked. I've trusted my gut ever since then. Story 26. I was in a long-term relationship for several years during college. One time, we went on a short road trip with my beautiful best friend and 2 other friends, and I was in just a horrible mood, no idea why. Several months later, when we were off again, I was in the shower and the weirdest thought popped into my head: boyfriend should date best friend. They'd be perfect together. It didn't make any sense, but I felt compelled to address it with boyfriend. I called him and told him what had popped into my head, and he immediately confessed that he'd been in love with her since before we had broken up. To be clear, this love affair was completely one-sided and my friend had no idea until after I did. When the boyfriend eventually declared his love, she gave him a verbal lashing and was totally freaked out. Story 27. My buddy was in the ICU at the hospital. He'd had an epileptic seizure that had lasted well over 10 minutes, days before, and had not regained consciousness yet. I got in the car after work, fully planning on going home, and got a gut feeling that I absolutely must go to the hospital, so I did. And I walked right into the ICU, even though visiting hours were over, and asked if I could see him. I got the secretary to laugh by asking, "Come on really, when's the next time I'm gonna see this guy?" I couldn't bring myself to say goodbye. I did say thank you though. He obviously couldn't comprehend my thanks for being one of the good guys, and I'm not sure he could process the fact that I had my hand on his shoulder, but I hope there was at least a little flash of recognition that something good had just happened and someone was being nice to him. The next morning, I got a call from a mutual friend saying he'd passed away. Story 28. This is my grandfather's story when he was in the Navy back in WW2. He was on ship at a base doing some grunt work. It's been years since me or my dad heard the story, so some details are lost. And all of a sudden he decided he needed to get off the ship, so he made his way off. I forget if he had to make an excuse or something. But not even 2 minutes after he got off, the ship explodes. An aerial attack hit the base, from the Japanese. My grandfather loved through Pearl Harbor purely because of a gut feeling. Thanks Pop Pop. Story 29. A few years back, I was playing Neverwinter alone like I always did because I was nervous about joining voice chats. I had turned down several guild requests, but this one that I got while I was doing elemental quests made me feel really urgently like I should accept it. So I did and immediately got a chat invite too, which I would normally not accept and say I prefer text chat, but I accepted it without all that. We all started talking and there was one guy I just clicked with so heavily. The next few weeks we spent as much time as we could in chat together, and now he's my forever person. Things didn't work out with that particular guild, but me and Mai are still going strong, and I know he's the one for me. Story 30. I was sitting in high school band class that morning. A friend of mine popped into my head out of nowhere. We weren't super close, but we're in a lot of the same after-school clubs and classes together. She was suddenly in the forefront of my mind and I felt extremely uneasy. A little while later the principal announced over the school's intercom system that she had passed away that morning in a car accident on her way to school. Story 31. I was walking on the sidewalk of a busy street. As I approached a streetlight where there was also a trash can, I got this weird feeling and decided to veer my path away from the street and toward the shops. After I passed the trash can, a car jumped the curb and smashed into the streetlight trash can. Can't explain it. Just felt like I needed to get away from that one area, and a moment after I moved, a car crashed there. I totally would have been hit by it had I not moved away. Story 32. My grandma's gut instinct saved my mom's life, allowing me to be born eventually. When my mom was little, they were playing hide and seek. She took her little cat and hid inside an icebox. It's different than a fridge. It locked her inside, and it was airtight. My gran was inside the house cooking, and back then, unless someone's arm was hanging off and near death, the kids played without interference. My mom said the air was leaving. The cat had already passed out and mom said she knew she wasn't going to make it. My gram just knew. She went outside to get her, saved her and her cat, and took an axe to the icebox. Edited because I can't spell. Story 33. My girlfriend and I were looking for apartments for a few months to no avail. I came across one that she absolutely loved. We went and looked at it soon after. It was a 2-bedroom with a large living room and multiple closets. Although for some reason I just didn't like it. Now I'm not normally one to get bad vibes, but for some reason I really just did not feel right in the place. I told the landlord we just weren't interested. My girlfriend was a little upset with me, especially since we had been looking at quite a few places and this one was right in our price range. I told her for some reason I just got a bad vibe being in there. A few weeks later we found a cheaper place and the perfect size not too far from that other apartment. So it all worked out in the end. Fast forward to a year later, my girlfriend and I are watching TV when she begins to smell smoke. We shut off the TV and go about the apartment trying to find the source. Soon we begin to hear sirens going down the streets. We look out the windows and don't see anything going on, so I said I'd go outside and figure out what was happening. The smell was much stronger outside. I walked 2 blocks over to follow the sirens and see smoke pouring out of that apartment we had looked at. There were fire trucks everywhere and more kept coming. I stared in disbelief as the place we almost rented was being sounded by firemen smashing out windows. Almost laughing as one man in sandals holding up his shorts with one hand ran towards the fire attempting to be a hero. Only when an officer threatened to arrest him did he back off. At the end of it I counted 18 fire trucks lined up and down the street. Most of them seemed to be just waiting ready in case the fire spread. After watching for what seemed like forever, I realized I forgot my phone to call my girlfriend. I walked back and found her with my landlord and his wife in the backyard. The landlord lived in the building. I told them that the place up in flames was the place we almost rented. My girlfriend was in disbelief. My landlord offered me a beer and we all just watched for probably another hour as the firemen just kept the blaze under control. After the fire was put out, a total of 3 buildings were lost, including the building with the unit we almost rented. The next day I purchased renter's insurance. I'm not a religious person, but I definitely believe that bad vibes actually mean something. Story 34. I was out with my aunt and this much older woman, maybe in her 90s, stopped us at the grocery store saying she was a psychic and she didn't usually stop people, but I needed to be much more careful when I'm on my own, and strongly suggested I need to carry pepper spray. When I asked why, and she said she knows I love to take walks and be by myself but am too consumed in my thoughts or distracted by the beauty to recognize danger right away. I took this lightly and didn't really agree until I was at a reptile expo. My dad was in the bathroom and I was walking around looking at snakes. I was holding this ball python when I felt breath on my neck and awkwardly moved over without looking over my shoulder, assuming somebody else wanted to look at the snakes. Then this woman aggressively shoved her way between me and this other person like she was ready to fight with him. She then told me it was a strange man who was following me around and she had a really bad feeling about him. Being a mother, she kept her eye on me and he had hovered over me an uncomfortable long time once I was alone. She was the second one who told me to watch my surroundings or carry pepper spray. So I thanked her and looked past her to see the man she was talking about. He did give off bad vibes, really tall, long stringy hair, sunken eyes, scars on his face. That's two strangers with gut feelings about me, so guess who owns pepper spray now? Side note, I'm a really small 16-year-old girl, so I suppose I do appear pretty vulnerable.